I'm Charlene Giannetti. I'm a member of the Parish Council here at St. Thomas More. I first met Maria-Cristina Necula when she started to write for my website, Woman Around Town. She has a lot of knowledge and expertise in opera, and she was the perfect writer to review productions at the Metropolitan. But what I soon learned was that she also had a lot of contacts in the world of opera, and so she was able to get access to some of the stars and interview them for features on our website, which was just fabulous. Her most recent one was an interview with the incomparable Renee Fleming. So you can all go to the website and read that. So I knew Christina had come over to the US from Romania, but it wasn't until she asked me to read a draft of her book that I really learned everything that had happened to her and her family, how she had grown up as a child under a brutal dictator in Romania, and how only through persistence and courage did she and her parents end up coming to America. She didn't time the release of this book for when it came out, but it's coming out at a time when all of us are a little bit concerned about losing some of our own freedoms here in this country. So it really is very relevant to our country today. And also, it's a story of an immigrant, someone who came to our country to look for a better life and found it. And that's a story that's also resonating and making headlines. So, Christina's journey, how did she survive? She discovered opera through the grace of her mother. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about her journey in Romania to the US. And then you're going to have a real treat, the opportunity to hear this amazing voice, which began all those years ago as a child's voice under the quince tree in Romania. Christina. Okay, we have one mic, so we have to pass it back and forth. So I'm going to ask her the first question. And I think we'll start with her telling us what the significance is of the title, The Voice Beneath the Quince Tree.
Thank you. Well, first of all, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see you all here tonight. And Charlene, thank you for organizing this. Thank you to the St. Thomas More Parish Events Committee. I'm very thrilled to do this. The quince tree, so where I grew up in Romania, in my house, there grew a quince tree, which was a bit unusual because you don't expect that in that part of the world. And I would think it magical because my mom was able to create this jelly, sweet jelly out of the quinces. But then I would also play around it. I was an only child, so my childhood was pretty solitary. I would make up all kinds of characters. And that increased, especially when I started to go to the opera. I could not sing, but I would act the scenes from the operas that I saw, and the quince tree was my partner, my acting partner. For instance, if any of you know La Traviata by Giuseppe Verdi, he was Alfredo, so I would die in front of him and I would kiss it and embrace it. And it was quite funny. It was funny, but for me it meant a lot, this kind of relationship with this entity, this being.
So you were an only child and very close to your mom and dad. So tell us a little bit about your parents, and especially your father, who was a very important person in Romania at that time.
Yes, my father was a software engineer and professor at the Polytechnic University of Bucharest, and he was the sole or the best microprocessor specialist in Romania. That's why he was seen as an asset, as a treasure. My mother was also a professor, also in engineering at the Polytechnic University, but she was less feisty, let's say. My father was always outspoken. He could not kiss up to the communist regime, and that's one of the reasons that he dared to do what he did, that he defected. So because of his position, he was sent to London for a conference, which was unheard of. We could not travel to the West. We were only allowed to travel to the Eastern Bloc countries. And while he went to London, that very night, he escaped from the hotel early in the morning and he went into hiding, and that's how the whole story started.
So tell us how you felt when you found out that Tati, is that,
Yes.
yeah, that he had defected and left you and your mom in Romania.
Yes, Tati is actually the word for daddy in Romanian, so we call our dads Tati. I mean, I was in shock because what did I know? I knew my life, I knew my house, my garden, my cats, my friends, and I was in love with that life, even though, you know, and I had no idea that anything else was possible. So for me, the fact that all of a sudden my favorite parent at the time just disappears, he just leaves telling me he's going to be back in 2 weeks, and then my mother tells me he's not returning, that was a huge shock. And I couldn't grasp why we needed to leave Romania. I had no idea why this was necessary, even though she was trying to convince me that it will be a better life, that it's the United States, that was our eventual destination, but it was tough.
So tell us about your mom, because through all of this, she was really your strength, and she got you through this time after your father left.
So my mother, of course, bore the brunt of his defection. Immediately, she was called by the Securitate, and that's the secret police, that's sort of the Romanian KGB, and interrogated. And what they were trying to do, they were trying to find out whether she knew, whether she had been part of this plan around his escape. And she always said no, 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 no. And she had to, every week, she had to write a different statement about not knowing, but she learned that she had to vary it a little bit so it didn't seem rehearsed. So my mother faced all of this without letting me see it. She tried to disguise her fear, she tried to inject fun in everything that we were doing, and that's why she took me to the opera, because there was really nothing to do in the evenings, and with all the oppression and the scarcity and the television programming, which was like every evening, 2 channels, mostly filled with Ceausescu, the dictator propaganda, and the Communist Party doctrine, and very strange Soviet, East German movies. She took me to the opera. So I guess she's the hero of this book, because she besides my father, but she protected me from any kind of perception of this terror.
So you were, at that point, 10 years old, is that right? 10, 11 years old?
Yes.
What was your perception of what was happening in Romania? I mean, did you have any idea that you were living under a dictatorship?
No, I didn't even know what a dictator meant, because we were really not allowed to see much of the outside. Yes, sometimes we saw, there were Western films coming in, and for some reason, I don't know why they allowed Star Wars to play there. That was such an amazing thing to go and see Star Wars, but it still didn't dawn on us to compare Darth Vader to Ceausescu. You know, that is so obvious. You could have done that. I think this is the only life that I knew, and I had no idea that anything else was possible. One time we went to the east. I went to Hungary, Czechoslovakia at the time, and East Germany with my parents. And there, it was better than in Romania, but they were still on the Eastern Bloc. So it didn't dawn on me that life could have been better or any different.
So after your father left, how did the people around you react? I mean, they knew that something had happened. They probably knew the story that he had defected. Were they supportive? Were you suddenly shunned by some people who thought they might get in trouble if they started to comfort you?
Most people stayed away, and we did too, because I think my mother was very careful not to shed any light of complicity on friends, on family. And I think the only people we were seeing were my grandparents and some cousins, but friends of the family less. So I don't remember being as social, or my mother being social during that time.
Yeah, what an awful thing. So tell us about the first opera that you went to with your mom. That would have been in Bucharest? What was it like?
Yeah. So I know the date, May 15th, 1985. This is imprinted in my mind. It was the marriage of Figaro, Le Nozze di Figaro. First time, this 10-year-old kid taken to the Bucharest Opera House. My mom took a risk because she had no idea how I would react if I was going to sit still or not. And there were no other kids in the audience. I do remember being proud of that I was the only one. And the moment the overture starts, it starts with the overture, and the moment those sounds came up and came my way, I felt like all of a sudden I was stunned. And that continued when the curtain opened and you hear those first sounds, because you've got Susanna and Figaro singing in the beginning, and I was in awe. I didn't believe that it was possible that the throat could create such sounds, the human throat, and I knew that I wanted to do that, even though everyone who heard me sing at the time would have told you a different story. They would have paid me not to make any sounds. I mean, I sounded horrible as a kid. So it was love at first sight, and it was also a kind of madness, I would say, in my mind to think, I want to do this. I want to be on the stage, and that's what I want to do.
Now, that was in totally the opposite of what your reaction was the first time you heard Maria Callas sing. And then she went on to become your big heroine, and you've written about her on Woman Around Town. You just love this woman. So what was it like to hear her and not appreciate her talent at that point, and then go to this opera and look at things a little bit differently?
When I heard her, I think I was about 8, and there was a program on television where they had Callas sang. She sang from the Barber of Seville, and immediately my reaction was to laugh, because I thought it ridiculous. All of a sudden you hear going up and down really fast, and I had never heard that kind of voice before. So my parents had to kick me out of the living room. My father was still there, so he had not defected yet, and said, just go outside. But there was also another part of me that wanted to imitate her at the same time. So I went outside in front of the cats, and I started trying to make the same sounds. I got hissed at, I got almost scratched, but it was a dichotomy, the ridiculousness of it, and yet I wanted to do it.
But now you started to get to know some of the actual stars of opera at that time in Romania. Tell us a little bit about Victor, who became a very important person in your life at that time, because your father was gone, and he became sort of a father figure to you.
Yes, one of the opera stars that we befriended, because I enjoyed sneaking backstage and just showing up at the different singers' dressing rooms. I wanted to touch the characters that I was seeing on stage. So this tenor, who was really one of the top tenors at the Bucharest Opera House, was kind, and he saw this kid's interest in opera. And so he befriended me and my mother, and we would go over to his house, and he had a son almost my age. And for the 2.5 years that we were separated from my father, they became this family, this refuge. And I would always ask Victor about opera and about singing, and either to demonstrate to me or to play records. And he was delighted that he found an eager kid, because his son couldn't care less. His son, every time he tried to talk about opera, he would just walk out of the room. And that created some jealousy between me and his son, because I was the attentive kid and his son wasn't. But Victor was very important also, because he heard me sing, and at that time, I don't know how I was brave enough to try to open my mouth in front of him, but he did. He said that I'm still too young, that maybe it will develop, and he did recognize a musical ear. And then he did become a sort of father figure. It was surreal. I would see him on stage as all of these characters, and then we would be like this close to him, talking, and this kind of line between opera and reality became very blurry, very blurry. I didn't know whether I was in his presence, he was Alfredo or Hoffman or Radames or whoever, or, who was he? And then I would see him on stage, and he would do something really funny. Sometimes he would say, well, if I, in this scene, if I move this portrait this way, it means I'm doing that for you. So I got such VIP treatment as a kid.
So, Christina, during this time, what were you hearing from your father? Were you getting regular communications? Did you know where he was, what he was doing, and what he may have been doing to help you and your mom make it to either London or the U.S.?
Yes, at first we would get letters, but I think because the Securitate, the secret police, wanted us to know they were reading it, they would open them and just throw them open in the backyard. So they weren't even placed in the mailbox. So they would just show us that they were doing this. So my father was careful. He was not writing anything specific about where he was, all of his addresses. So from London, after those 2 weeks in hiding in London, he went to Vienna. Vienna was the route to the west. From Vienna, you could get either to Canada or to the US. And in Vienna, he stayed for 9 months. So he never told us the exact address. It was always a P.O. box. Mm-hmm. There was no explicit communication about what he's doing. But I guess my mom knew, maybe. The only time that it became clear was when he got to the United States. After a while, we had applied for the visa to leave and for family reunification. But he was able to get a congressman, Congressman Thomas Manton, the late congressman. He passed away. He was an angel. He got 44 members of the U.S. Congress to send a letter directly to Ceausescu, to the dictator, asking for our release because we had the right to family reunification. So, so we didn't know much about what he was doing. The funny thing that we always laugh about is that he had to cook for himself when he was alone in Vienna. So he would always ask my mom for recipes. And we were always wondering, what is the Securitate thinking when they see 3 grams of this or 5 ounces of this? Is that a code or not? We always like to think about that.
So I know that at one point, you and your mother thought you were going to be leaving fairly soon, and then there were delays. Was that something that happened, that there was this stop and start, that you were getting ready and then, no, you can't go yet? What was that like? That must have been frustrating.
There was a point in around Easter 1987 when there was a senator from the U.S. coming to Romania for some diplomatic talks. And because Congressman Manton had put so much pressure on them, he was going to take us with him and bring us to, I guess, fly directly into Washington, D.C. But the Romanian authorities they didn't like it. They didn't like it at all. So they called my mother in, and the way she told me the story is they presented her with a list of all the relatives, pointing out where they live and how old they are, and saying, well, it's not good to leave so fast because how are you going to have time to say goodbye? And you never know, if you're going to see each other again, and just such veiled threats, one after the other. So I guess they were saying, if you leave now and make this whole media case, things are going to happen. And we didn't. I mean, my mother refused to go at that time, but then eventually, 2 months later, they let us go.
And how were your relatives reacting at that point? I mean, were they happy that you might be leaving? Were they fearful? Did they want you to stay?
I think there were mixed feelings because we did try to see everybody before we left. I know my dad's parents were fearful, were anxious, and they were missing him and everything else. But mostly they were happy. Also, I think because we were thinking of opening doors. So if we're here, maybe they can come visit. There was all that possibility in the air, and the idea that, okay, someone's doing this, and it was still 1987, so this was 2 years before the revolution happened, before the wall fell, and it was really the peak, the worst time of the communist regime, those last 2 years.
So I'm a cat person. You had to leave your cat behind. Tell us about that.
That was really, really heartbreaking because they were not allowing us to take him with us. And he just, he knew, as I wrote in the book, he sensed it like even 2 weeks before, and he would not even come to near me. You could see on the expression on that little face that he felt betrayed, and it was the worst parting of my life, because I knew and I hoped that I would see my grandparents and other relatives, but this being that had been with me throughout my childhood, I didn't know if I would see him again, and it was really heartbreaking. And I have to tell you, if you're superstitious, or I don't know if you believe in curses, but I came to the US, I tried to have cats again, never. I could never, because immediately I became allergic. So I had never ever been allergic to cats, but here I got one. We actually got one that looked like him, like my cat. No, never. I could never approach a cat.
I believe it.
Yeah.
So when you thought about what it was going to be like living in the U.S., what did you envision? What were your thoughts about, from the TV shows you may have watched or what people told you, what did you think it was going to be like coming to New York?
The most vivid images were from Raymond Chandler's novels, because they had Romanian translations of those novels, and my parents somehow acquired them. So all I could think of was California and bungalows and these rich people and danger and clandestine, chasing around. And that's what I was thinking, and it seemed very glamorous and very dangerous at the same time. I was obsessed with Philip Marlowe. I thought, and actually, there was a point when the Securitate agent was following me to school. So they were so cautious. They wanted to see whether the kid was transmitting something. So I always imagined I was Marlowe, and I was, trying to sneak around it. So that was my vision. The other thing that we saw was Dallas. I don't know why Dallas, California and Texas. So I had no vision of New York. I didn't know how it would be here. Those were my two images of the U.S., California and Texas. Yeah.
So what was it like when you finally saw your dad after all that time? What was that reunion like?
It was stunning. I was stunned, and
How old were you at that point?
So I was already 12 and a half. And it's those 2.5 years where you don't have him and you're almost a teenager. And what I realized, like that very first night, was that it was him, but it wasn't him. And then also that I didn't know how to be affectionate with him anymore, and he didn't know how to be affectionate with me, because I was already older and there had been this distance. I realized that it was not going to be the same. Yet I was so happy, and he just showed us so many wonders, in even starting with the next day, walking into a supermarket, right?
Yeah, so I want to talk about the supermarket, because there's a very funny section in the book about you and your mom going to the supermarket and how you were piling things in the cart. Talk about that.
Yes, this was actually the very next day, I believe, after we arrived. My dad said, well, let's see your first American supermarket. And we went, and he just let us explore. And both of us, but I remember especially me, we were in shock, because you saw so many different kinds of cereal, pasta, anything. When if you think of Romania at the time, the shelves were empty. Basically what you could find were just cans of, pickled something or fish, or it was just such scarcity. So this frenzy took over me, I guess, and I would just run around screaming ham and pulling stuff in, and I ended up with a huge cart, and my dad said, it's not going away. And that was the hard part, to get used to the fact that we're still gonna find it there tomorrow and the day after that, and it's okay, you don't have to buy the whole store because it's there. That was the mentality in Romania. if products arrived by any chance, you had to get as much as possible because you never knew when they would arrive again. So yeah, it is, and I think that the people who were watching us probably thought there was something going on outside and some sort of emergency because we were in this crazy of wearing food.
So when you started school, I know that you talked a little bit about how you were dressing to go to school and you stood out a little bit among all the other students there. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I had Romanian clothes, a lot of, I guess, Eastern European clothes, a lot of stuff made by my grandmother, and didn't fit at all. I remember the first day of classes, they all looked at me strangely. My hair was like undefined, like this huge mop of something. And so I walk into 7th grade not knowing, English, English very little, not that much. Sort of English that I learned in Romania was the so-called British English, but the accent was a mess. And so I'm trying to be, not be seen, and I sit in the back. The teacher walks in that first period, and me, used to the strictness of the Romanian classroom, I immediately stand up, because we had to stand up whenever the teacher walks in, and everything falls backwards, my chairs, everything flies off. So of course everybody's looking at this weird kid, acting so hyper. Eventually I got used to it, and it was interesting that when they heard Romania, some of the kids said, well, Dracula, because they associated Romania with Transylvania and with Dracula. So at first I didn't really know what that was. We never learned that in school. We never learned about the vampire lore. But when I asked my mom, she told me, well, Bram Stoker, it's made him famous. And I started telling kids, yeah, you know what? Look at my last name. It's Necula. Then Dracula, we are related. He is a very, very distant uncle. Respect. In that moment, there was no more laughter and no more. Even though I looked strange and I acted strange, I spoke bad English, I was cool because I was related to the count.
So how did you think that, aside from that incident, how did school in America differ from what you were learning in Romania? I mean, was there a real difference?
When I started, especially in math, I think in Romania they were really crazy with math, right? And they were drilling us a lot. So in 7th grade, I felt a sense of relief because at least there was something that I could be good at without so many words, right? In English, that took a while. But then, American history or other things that I didn't
You didn't
know.
study that.
But math, I think, was the place where I could be a star because of what I had learned in Romania. They were really tough. We had after school hours in which they were doing a lot of math, the math club and things like that, yeah.
So what part did opera start to play in your life once you moved to New York?
Well, I wanted to pursue that dream. The dream that was implanted in Romania, I wanted to pursue it. And when my dad heard that, he thought, we had lost our minds in Bucharest because he knew that I didn't have a voice. And he also thought that it was very impractical to study opera. What are you gonna do with opera? So I wanted it so badly that I discovered a music school in my neighborhood. So I went in secret and I signed up and I just send my parents the bill. They'd send me here to sign up. And I started taking piano lessons and solfege and things like that. And I was already 14 at the time. And yeah, there was a huge scandal at home. There's big fight at home. But my mother, who knew this, she supported me. So she convinced my father that I should keep going. But I didn't, I sang a little bit at the time, but I didn't really discover the voice until somebody discovered it when I was 16.
So do you remember the first opera you went to in New York? Did you go to the Met?
No, actually, the New York City Opera. The New York City Opera was my first. I saw Tosca, and that was magnificent. The only thing that shocked me was that if you know Tosca in the Act 2, Tosca kills Scarpia, kills the guy who terrorizes her, and she says, "Questo il bacio di Tosca." This is Tosca's kiss. So everybody was laughing at that. So, because I guess they thought it was funny. You had the super titles and it says this is Tosca's kiss as she stabs him. So maybe people thought it was funny. For me, it was shocking because I was so serious about opera. You can't laugh. I mean, of course, if it's the Barber of Seville or something funny, Elixir of Love, sure. But Tosca, when she kills him, how can you laugh? Otherwise, I was so impressed by the sets and the sumptuousness of it all, which in Romania, we didn't have such, big sets. They didn't have money for sets.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say, Christina, that what role does opera play in your life now?
It's still very present. While I did not pursue that career, I write about it. As you know, I do interviews. I try my best to support it, and I've spoken about it in schools and I introduced students of various ages, from middle school to high school to college, to just that beauty of it, because once they give it a chance, they realize that it's about basic human emotions. It's nothing so intimidating. It's sold that way maybe, or it seems that way. Mm-hmm. But the sooner they start, the better it is. And it's still a very important part
of your life.
In my life, yes.
So before Christina sings, a few questions. You want to answer a few questions? Anybody have a question? All right, right here.
What did your father do when he got to New York?
So he was able to get hired as an engineer for a company, and he had good credentials, and he was a hard worker. So we were fortunate in that sense that he found a job.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, yes.
You said you were Romanian. Your English is good. Where'd you learn?
Here. Yeah, so when I arrived, I was 12, and then, I did most of my schooling here. Yeah, and thank you. I find sometimes that my brain wants to switch to Romanian, and then I try to find the English equivalent, which makes for some funny expressions sometimes, but yeah. Yes.
So after the wall falls, and then after the Ceausescu's are no longer there, have you been going to Romania? Did you see your family, or have you broken completely away from Romania?
Oh no, I could never break away. Yes. So actually, I have to tell you that I was able to go back in the summer of '89. This was right before the wall fell, and see my grandparents, because I even though my father would have not been allowed back in because he was the defector, but we left okay. And after that, I would go almost every year. I have my friends, my former classmates from first to sixth grade when I left. We kept in touch, so we see each other. I still have family, although many of them have left. They're in other parts of the world. But yes, I need that dose of Romania. I need to just be there and hear the language and breathe that air and see the sights, even if it's just 1 week.
In 1990, I believe, in East Berlin, the Stasi files were released to the public after the East German government tried to destroy the files that they had on each other's, of the population, everybody's neighbors and things. Was something like that available to you in Romania, and were you able to see your father's secret police files?
They were made available, yes. I never saw them, and he didn't want to see them. He just refused, because a lot of breakups happen after that in friendships and between families, because you could find out so-and-so was an informer, so-and-so was watching you. One interesting thing that happened last summer, I went to Romania, and one of my classmates told me that he asked for his father's files, and in his father's files, they had noted when he and I were playing in my backyard. So even when kids got together with the child of a defector, they would write that down and they would say, oh, he spent an hour in the backyard playing ball with, so-and-so who's the child of a defector. So it's funny that he told me that he saw his own father's files, but my parents have never wanted to see theirs. They can.
I can understand that.
Did your mother ever really know if he was, did she know?
Even today, she won't say it. She won't say it. So she still maintains that no, because I think in order to get past those 9 months of interrogations, she just had to adopt it down to her bone marrow. So now, even now, it's no.
And who helped your dad? Because it was a very tough time to escape.
So that trip to London, he went with two of his colleagues, and I think one of them was working for the Securitate. But then in the morning, he went away from the hotel, and he went to a British professor who had come to Romania for some exchanges, and they had met before. He just showed up on his doorstep, took a chance, and said, I am defecting, can you please help me? Can I stay here for, a week or something until he figured out what to do? The man was kind. I don't know what would have happened if he'd said no, but he stayed with this professor. And then in Vienna, there were all kinds of also foundations, like the Tolstoy Foundation was very, very helpful to immigrants, to refugees. So, and then in the U.S., he was the congressman was very kind.
I was wondering, in writing your book, how much did you interview your parents about their experiences as you were growing up?
I had to, because the book is written from my 10, 11, 12-year-old self, and I wanted that. I wanted to have that voice and that vision. But then I thought, their story needs to be told. And so there is one chapter that it is them. So I sat down with each one of them to find out. I knew bits and pieces, but when I was writing the book, I needed to refresh that and also find out what I didn't know. And I don't think that they told me everything. It was difficult, and it was difficult especially for my mother, because reliving those moments, I have in chapter 3, the interrogation word for word. She remembers what they were asking her and how she was answering. So it's almost like a play.
Yes. This is another question, but can you talk a little bit about your experience of how and when you decided not to pursue opera and what that was like for you?
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard because it had been a dream for such a long time, in parallel, the writing was developing. I was writing for different magazines. I was always writing poetry. But I think when what I did in 2007, 2008, is I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. I had studied in Vienna too, and I decided to interview some of the top stars just to see what it was like for them. So I pursued that, and then this is while my first book came about, Life in Opera, all these conversations with these stars. And I realized that if you are not completely fanatic about it, and if you don't have all the gifts for it, it's better not to. If you want to be at a certain level, it's better to be wise. And if you have a lot of interests, it's not, this path is you have to have almost like a religious devotion to it if you want to do it. And you have to have I would say, a very natural voice, which I didn't. I think that my teacher, the teacher that I studied with, she helped me manage it, but it was never like one of these people that could just open their mouth and sing. So